Before we move on, I'd like to just emphasize the rules of the chambers. Please note that you are not allowed to eat within the chambers. You are allowed to drink water. Additionally, when you want to leave to the restroom, please note to use the side entrances. And when you would like to come back, please use the middle entrance, and when we cite you to come in, you are allowed to then come in. Do not enter while a speaker is speaking, and have that etiquette within our council chambers.
The bathrooms can be located outside the chambers, like essentially directly behind the speaker's chair. If you go straight down there, the bathrooms will be found there.
Speaker, may I please have a point of self-privilege?
Granted.
That is the Junior Mayor of Mogale City. Madam Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Junior Mayors, the two teams progressing to the final. I think we'll get about 10 minutes to side adjust and I think just to prepare their case. I think just after we toss the coin, it's Mogale City 1. Can we have the team to the front, please? Mogale City 1. And the second team progressing to the final is the City of Johannesburg 1. Can I please have the team to the front as well? Okay. Can I get a coin? I'm not going to write the rules down for you.
We're giving you caucus time for this match, and you guys are set to come back at this time.
Good afternoon, everyone. Please note that as the teams have gone to prep their sides and adjust, we are giving you a 5 minutes caucus time to just go and rest outside and You should be back within the chambers at 2:30, so you may be dismissed.
Your preparation time has now adjourned.
As Please just note that we are waiting 5 minutes because the Speaker of Council, the senior speaker, will be coming to the council chambers. We will begin the debate. A few ground rules for the debate. Speakers, please note that you have 6 minutes to give your case. Additionally, we will clap once for the first minute. We will clap once again in the 5th minute, and we'll clap you. I will mute the mic at 6 minutes over 15 seconds. A quick reminder of the topic. Leaders should be held to a higher ethical standard than ordinary citizens. I repeat, the topic for this debate is leaders should be held to a higher ethical standard than ordinary citizens. Allow me to welcome first speaker from side proposition to give their speech. They have extended the time to 7 minutes. Additionally, please note that in this debate, we will be having, after opposition speaker, so the second speaker from opposition, will be having a floor debate. 5 minutes will be given to the members that are present in council to give insight in the debate. And throughout this session, members of the team are not allowed to respond.
Am I audible if I speak like this? I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Spider-Man has always been my favorite superhero, not only because he can basically fly and he dates the likes of Emma Stone, but because Spider-Man is the embodiment of selfless leadership. He's an inspiration, a role model, and puts himself to the highest ethical standard to the extent that one life lost is a mission failed. Someone asked me if the JSC was going to take home that trophy. I said, like Peter Parker, with great power comes great responsibility. 3 parts of setup before I get into my argument. Firstly, then, what do we support? Leaders should be held to a higher ethical standard than ordinary citizens. What does that look like? A couple of points of framing. A, we're holding them to standards and expectations that go beyond just legal or minimal moral duties, like demanding more transparency, less tolerance for personal gain, or dishonesty. Note that this doesn't mean we neglect the ethics of ordinary people. We just demand that leaders in particular are held to a higher moral expectation, i.e. expecting that they'll do the right thing even when lying would get them more personal gain, or prioritizing the public even when they could personally gain. Second, B, how do we do this? We have things like harsher punishments in place when it found out that a leader does the wrong thing, or you have social precedents and that expectation that i.e. emphasis on them being role models for kids. But C, what are leaders in this debate? These are people in positions of institutional or societal authority. Note that these exist in every walk of life. For example, CEOs, judges, military commanders, teachers, celebrities, politicians. Crucially, we don't limit this characterization in this debate. Second part of setup, we're willing to trade off the perceived humanity of leaders, and so it's harsh to hold them to such a high standard because they're only human. One, because of the fair trade that you have. Leadership is something that is voluntary, thus the responsibility of ethical purity is something that is voluntary, and that strict accountability is something that you opt into, i.e. the moment that you choose to lead, you accept a higher duty, just as a doctor is held to higher standards of care or judge in neutrality, regardless of people being imperfect and subjective. But secondly, mistakes by leaders are often less forgivable. This is because leadership often comes with the privilege of education, guidance, power, wealth, which increases your capacity to reduce mistakes. Final part of setup then. We're going to prove to you in this debate 2 things and how we're going to win. Firstly, we're going to prove to you in an argument why it's principally justified to hold these leaders to a higher ethical standard. But secondly, in Kevin's argument, he's going to prove to you why we get better governance. That's how this debate is going to be won. On to my argument then on how we're principally justified to hold leaders to a higher ethical standard. This argument is important because we're able to prove to you that even if we don't get that better governance that Kevin's going to beautifully show you in a second, we're still justified in the attempt to hold these leaders to such a standard. 7 layers to this principle. Opposition, get ready. Firstly, the cost of ethical standard or ethical failure is higher for leaders because the actions of leaders affect entire populations. This is structurally true because leaders have more influence and resources than regular people, and they're able to dictate the lives of all those who follow them because they've been elected to make decisions on the public's behalf. This means that because you're no longer just representing yourself, you're representing an entire nation, the spillover effect of a good or bad decision increases drastically, which is impactful because if a leader abuses power, the scale of harm is exponentially greater because one corrupt official can harm millions. That's important because people don't get that input. The leaders are the only ones with a direct control over that outcome. Comparatively, an ordinary citizen lying may hurt a few people. If a president or CEO lies about war or healthcare or budgets, it harms whole nations. And the nuanced impact of that is that it lasts for a lot more generations to come that these leaders have a spillover effect over. Therefore, it's justified to hold these individuals to a higher form of ethical standard. For example, like in the US, the Flint water crisis could have been prevented if officials were pushed to act ethically and not just ignoring the harm caused by water contamination. Second layer to this principle, leaders set social norms and standards. It's important to understand that people look to leaders as role models and often want to mimic their behavior, which is especially true within the younger generation, i.e. why children learn from a young age to be selfless because Superman is always selfless and they love that guy, or because they take on virtues like patience from their parents because they look up to these figures for inspiration. This means that when leaders lie, cheat, or abuse power without consequence, citizens imitate or excuse those behaviors, which is impactful because you cause ethical decline in institutions. Therefore, we say that it is legitimate to hold these leaders to a higher moral expectation. For example, when Zuma repeatedly avoided accountability during his presidency, it contributed to institutional decay and normalized corruption. Comparatively, the ethical leadership of Nelson Mandela helped build democratic values in a broken South Africa. Third reason as to why it's justified. Leaders have access to privilege, so their mistakes are less forgivable. I flag you back to the analysis I use in my trade-off. They have like education, guidance, advisors, etc. That means two things. A, mistakes are less excusable than ordinary citizens who don't have that same advantage. But B, leaders can't claim ignorance or desperation, meaning often their unethical actions are calculated choices, not survival decisions. Comparatively, a hungry person stealing bread is morally different from a millionaire embezzling state funds because both are wrong, but the latter is less excusable, i.e. in corporate executives involved in the Volkswagen emissions fraud made unethical decisions for profit despite having every advantage. Fourth layer to this principle. Ethical leadership creates moral capital that ordinary citizens can't build. This is because when people become leaders, they no longer represent their individuality, they represent a brand that only they uniquely can impact. This means that leaders are the only ones who can build or destroy the moral capital or public belief on a national scale. When leaders act ethically under pressure, it creates hope, legitimacy, and civic unity, something that no citizen can do alone. For example, Jacinda Ardern's compassionate leadership during the Christchurch attacks during strengthened New Zealand's identity as a just, inclusive society. Therefore, we ought hold these leaders to that standard. Fifthly, leaders operate in gray areas where ethics replace legal loopholes. This is because leaders often make decisions where there is no clear rule, i.e. what to do in war, what to do with like budgets and crisis management. This means that where the law doesn't guide them, the personal ethics are their only compass to make these decisions. So their ethical framework must be the strongest, clearest, and most principled than average people. Therefore, we hold them to that account. Sixthly, leaders must embody ethical leadership to inspire sacrifice. In hard times like wars, crisis, reforms, leaders ask citizens to make sacrifices, like paying higher taxes, enduring lockdowns, accepting unpopular laws. To ask them with moral authority, leaders must model the highest ethical behavior, because otherwise you get things like backlash and non-compliance, because like, if my leader's not doing it, then why should I? Seventhly, ethical leadership prevents a culture of exceptionality. Often within leadership, there are those that have a sense of entitlement, those who believe that there are exceptions to the rules. By holding them to a stricter societal standard, you filter out that diseased mindset and maintain a culture of humility and accountability in governance, and you are there to serve. You increase the capacity that they have to maintain the mindset that you are actually there to serve. With great power comes great responsibility. That responsibility is something that you uniquely get on the proposition side.
I'd like to thank that speaker for giving us that speech. I would like to call the first speaker of opposition to give their case. Hear, hear. Speaker, you can switch on the mic.
I'm starting in 3, 2, 1. We then firstly need to understand what's the rather happening within our societies. Firstly, we then rather have to look at why these ethical leaders would rather these leaders were rather elected at first place. Firstly, they were rather elected to then represent the people. These people who could not actually represent themselves were these ordinary people who rather elect and have someone to rather represent them and their behalves, on what decisions is then best, or which reasons, or to represent them based on reasons which one is best and caters for their needs and their needs within societies. We rather done with that already, going into today's rebuttals. Firstly, they tell us about their justification. Secondly, they tell us about, they're going to do this through these harsh punishments these harsh punishments because of, you know what, these are people who are in higher positions and power. We tell you, the first point of justification, we tell you that, you know what, your justification is rather harming these people, firstly. Secondly, these people are already being impacted as a whole. Why is this? Firstly, you look at how then these people are already having a pressure of trying to do, be a good representative, hence they're already making trying to make good decisions that's going to then benefit the society. Secondly, the pressure that's coming along with this, coming with being a leader, is that you need to then have a stand. You must know where you're actually standing, where you're actually standing with as a leader, the pressure that comes with it, you need to know where you're actually standing with your decision, whether you are with or without the people. This means that, you know what, your justification as a whole, it's entirely bad on these people, because firstly, these leaders are already dealing with higher pressure. Secondly, they're trying to bring the best, they're trying to give the best representation towards these people. Then going to the second point of how then they're going to do it through these harsh punishments, such as the harsh punishments, and doing it for their good reasons, for their wrongs that they have actually done within societies. We tell you that, you know what, doing a harsh punishment to someone who's representing you is rather it's rather immoral of you. That's already a problem of morality on your case. If you want to be moral, you'd rather treat people equal within societies. You cannot treat someone unequal because of they're representing your communities, your companies, your nation as a whole. The moment you're starting about talking about immorality, on your case it's happening more immorality than on our case. Our case, we're saying that, you know what, we'd rather have equality. We want everyone to have equal punishment as ordinary people within societies. Already done with that, already having two questions for the side of proposition. The first question is, what necessitated this debate? Secondly, what's then the problem that caused us to have this debate, to then have a better understanding of why we're then having this debate as a whole. So then done with that, going into our team's case, what do we better to prove? Better to prove that, one, holding these leaders to equal ethical standard would rather bring more equality and justice within our society. Second, within our society. Then going to our team case split. I, as the first speaker, will be talking more on representation and how then it's in the nature of humanity, and how then someone becomes a rather good leader by already having. So already done with that, going into the point of representation. The reasons to this, people are rather not representing themselves. They're rather representing the people who voted for them. Secondly, we tell you that, you know what, these people rather did not want to, were then not forced to represent these people. These ordinary people chose them to then represent them on their behalf because they have trust on these people. Secondly, they have the belief that these people, as a whole, these leaders they have the capability of taking choices on their behalf to benefit them, to help them in difficult situations. To simply show that these people are taking decisions on helping these people. Take an example of the leader of El Salvador, Nya Bukele, who then took a leadership role to be El Salvador's leader, a president in that matter of fact, to then help its community to end crime. He built a bigger prison, and everyone reported about crime. He took a harder decision of locking up, of trusting those people and locking up rather criminals. Now El Salvador is one of the it's one of the least countries with less crime, no higher crime rate. In a year, there's only one genocide, which shows that, you know what, these leaders are rather not representing themselves, but are rather representing the people. Secondly, it proves that the leaders are already doing decisions based on trying to be the best for their being on their best for the people and for those businesses and countries that they're actually representing. So already done with that, proving that, you know what, proving that the truthness of this point is that these people rather did not elect themselves to be leaders, but rather these people were then leaders because people had the belief and trust within these people to then become leaders and represent them. And why it is important because of one, no one can then where you find instances where
side opposition's case is completely revolving around this idea of and having citizens and like leaders be held to an equal level of like the ethical standard. But like strategically, we never hear from them like how we measure what's equal and how we're gonna like ensure that we get this equal standard, which like in terms of strategy is already off. But then in terms of rebuttal, on our side, we already told you about why the cost of failure for these leaders is often higher, because like of the representation that they have, of the community, and the fact that they dictate people's lives, they make decisions that affect people's lives. So the fact is that the stakes of their decisions isn't equal to a normal citizen, and the resources that they have, like we said in our first speech, isn't equal to a normal citizen. So the ethical standard that we hold them to, there's no obligation for that to also be equal because of the like imbalance in the power and the stakes that they have. They also told us about how they asked us about the morality of punishing people who represent us. They used like cherry-picked examples of when leaders are selfless. And like, yes, leaders can be selfless, but the problem becomes when leaders aren't selfless because like we mentioned, the stakes are so much higher, and we need to punish the people in positions of power who are like doing these corrupt things. We need to hold them accountable. That's where the morality comes in, because you can't say that it's more moral to, let someone get away with corruption because they're representing you. It's actually moral to hold them accountable because they were put into that position of power in order to represent you. By being corrupt, they are actually not representing you. It just contradicts the entire case. They also spoke about the increased pressure that is put on leaders. Like we mentioned, leadership is voluntary. It's a voluntary position that also comes with like its loads of privileges. And then they also mentioned that it's unfair to hold these people to a higher standard because they're human, they're imperfect. We already traded that off because of the fact that it's voluntary and they like accept that higher duty, and because of the privileges that they receive. But yeah, with that rebuttal out of the way, I want to present to you an argument on why our side receives better governance and our running of the government is better. There are 5 reasons under this argument. Firstly, our side is better at preventing corruption. Okay, why do I say this? This is because these leaders, they have access to resources that, like I said, an ordinary citizen doesn't have, and they have access to the power, like they're in those positions of power that they can abuse in corrupt ways, right? But on our side, by holding them to that high ethical standard, we can hold them accountable for the things that they do, the corruption that ends up happening. The impact of this is that, without the ethical standard, they're more likely to exploit the power that they have and the resources that they have for personal gain. Okay, if we don't hold them to this high ethical standard, systems get captured by elites. It's no longer the representation of the normal citizens. It's a representation of the will of a high-income politician, and then corruption just becomes normalized. On the comparative, holding them accountable, the corruption becomes more difficult, because of that high ethical standard. And I can bring an example of anti-corruption bodies that are working towards ending corruption. The second reason is that on our side, we create trust in the government. We create public trust and in the legal system. This is because citizens are more likely to obey laws and follow policies because when they know that the government is being run in an ethical and a moral way and in an effective way. Obviously, you're not going to support the South African government if you know that all of your money is just going to Zuma's trust fund, for example. On our side, we create that trust by holding them to that higher ethical standard. The impact of this is also political stability. We get that long-term civic engagement, voter turnouts, etc. Whereas on the comparative, they have low voter turnouts, they have protests, civil unrest, etc. Before I continue, I'll take your POI.
Do you think holding a leader to a higher ethical standard will mitigate corruption?
Yes, and that's my argument. Basically, we're saying that by holding these leaders to a high ethical standard, we are preventing corruption because, like we mentioned in our first, it's because we're holding them to a high ethical standard, we're holding them accountable for their actions, we're telling them no, that this corruption isn't okay. We're giving them the deterrence against corruption by holding them to that standard, telling them that it's not okay. Anyway, third reason under this argument, our side reduces policy failures because of the fact that corrupt officials will often they often can distort figures in the policies that they're trying to get through, right? And so they act in ways that aren't in the interest of the public. They're now in the interest of of themselves, and they're doing it for personal gain, right? So on our side, the leaders act more in the interest of the majority as opposed to just themselves. Fourth reason then is that our side encourages accountability in everyone, because like we said in our stance, by holding these leaders to a high ethical standard, we aren't neglecting the ethics of any ordinary citizen. We're just pushing that leaders should be held to an even higher standard, which encourages accountability, like I mentioned in the POI, about how we're telling them that it's not okay, holding them accountable for their actions, having them punished when, it's clear that they haven't met this ethical standard. Fifth and final reason then is that on our side, we get improved international relations. There's also an impact of the principal argument that was mentioned in the first speech. But that idea of building the moral capital and being the only ones who can build that moral capital, and represent a nation, it improves internal relations because of that brand that they're creating. They, as the leaders, are the only ones who, international leaders are engaging with. So they create the image for the entire country. And yeah, that'll lead to more diplomacy, more economic growth. It has all of those benefits. Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank the second speaker for his speech. Allow me to reiterate the topic since our senior speaker is present. The topic for this debate is leaders should be held to a higher ethical standard than ordinary citizens. With that, I would like to call our second speaker from opposition to give the speech. Here.
Okay, I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. I'll be getting straight into my rebuttal. What we get from side proposition is that without ethical standard, these leaders will exploit their power. What they need to understand is that ethical standards don't mitigate or reduce team reconstruction. What my first speaker talked about is that he talked about representation. These leaders do not become leaders by choice, and he also talked about how the nature of our mistakes will always occur. Moving on to my first point, which will be about how the law is meant to apply equally regardless of the status. If we introduce high we risk confusing legal accountability with subjective morality, which can lead to unfair trials or biased enforcements. What people respect systems taken.
If we all voted for the JSC mayor, why do we have a leader of opposition to represent us?
Okay, so I'll be moving on to what we need to understand is that people respect systems that are fair and consistent, not systems that treat leaders as morally different. By applying equal ethical standards, we promote a culture where everyone, our citizens, our leaders, they will share responsibility for honesty and integrity. When we expect more from our leaders than regular people, it sends a message that ordinary citizens don't have to be ethical, which lowers the bar of public behavior. Unethical standards can be used to target leaders unfairly for things that shouldn't matter. If an ordinary citizen did them, this could create a selective outrage, and this weakens genuine efforts to fight corruption or misconduct. If an ordinary citizen lies, cheats, or evade laws or tolerate corruption, a corrupt society. Expecting leaders to be better is critical, a corrupt society produces corrupt leaders. So if the standard should be shared by all and not a few people. Moving on to my second point, which will be about equality before the law means having the same standard. What we need to understand is that the justice system on the principle that no one is above the law or below the law, holding leaders to a higher ethical standard may seem noble. This creates a double standard which contradicts fair and equal treatment. Leaders are so human, so expecting them to be morally perfect while the rest of society isn't, is unfair and impractical. What we also need to understand is that when expectations are too high, any mistake is exaggerated. This will discourage people from seeing good leadership roles. In a democracy, leaders are public servants, not moral. Holding them to a higher ethical standard creates a moral heresy that goes against the democratic ideal that all citizens are equal. When leaders are judged by stricter rules, it creates a division. This will fuel public resentment. For a society to work, everyone must be held to the same ethical standard, and legal rules must be held to the same ethical standard and legal rules, reinforcing the idea that no one is special, regardless of power. Like we say, Ubuntu, Ubuntu, Ngabantu. This is what creates this idea that having to apply to ethical standard is fair. Thank you.
I would like to thank the second speaker of opposition for giving his speech. Allow me to welcome third proposition speaker to give his speech. All right. So what we're going to do before we proceed to the third speakers is we're going to be having a floor debate for 5 minutes. This is for you to provide your insight, your take on the motion, and for the debate to begin. So you have 5 minutes. Speakers, you may unmute your mic. You may signal me with your hand so that we know, and then from there you'll unmute when I say granted. You may speak for your time. So anyone, it's a floor debate, so you can say your opinion, your insight. There's debaters in the room for sure. Yes, granted.
Okay, so my take in this, right, you have to understand that firstly, everyone is being held to an ethical standard. Whether ordinary leader, everybody is being held to an ethical standard. And this mainly goes for proposition, because I feel like they miss it, or the debate as a whole. Because you have to understand
Speaker,
when
please
you...
stand.
Oh, can I?
Stand up.
Okay, when you have to understand, the moment you increase this you make this a high ethical standard, you are not making these leaders highly ethical. You are making people expect highly from these leaders. They have to expect highly from these leaders. Secondly, when we're speaking of ethical standards, the question arises: whose ethical standards are we using? Are we using the Westerns, where they believe in individuality, in eyes and and everyone is an individual, or African, where they believe in Ubuntu, where everybody works together and everyone has the same value? These are the questions that I feel like should be answered and do sway where the debate goes. Thank you.
We still have 3 minutes, so any speaker. The male at the back with the cornrows, your hand was up. Are there any other insights that other teams or debaters?
POI.
You may be granted.
Okay, so this is for the second speaker going against the equal standards. No, the second speaker going for. Yeah. You said that it's not about going above the law, being above the law or below the law, right? But this is not about going above or below the law, but having an equal effect to the position that you are placed. So I want to understand that, like, this is not about being above or below, but actually being ranked equal to the position that you're given. Why is it that your level of responsibility or position cannot be an equal accountability or an equal reflection of what you've done already, given that you have a higher standard or a higher position already over the lives of many people? Thank you.
Are there any other debaters that would like to counter that? The learner at the back.
Okay, it's me again. Sorry, like I didn't clearly hear what the person before me said, but like I wanted to just state that like when a person becomes a leader, you are not like no longer seen as equal to ordinary people. Proposition have to prove that. Why isn't that enough? Because already they are not seen as equal, they're already being held to a slightly higher standard, right? Proposition has to prove why is that not enough, and like in this debate, how is that going, how does that not fix the problem of corruption? Yeah, that is it. Thank you.
Any other debater to counter what she said? I know the room is filled with debaters. The one, I think the junior mayor would like to give his insight. You are granted.
Well, I think this largely depends on what we mean on ethical standards. Sorry. Sorry about that. I think this largely depends on what we mean by high ethical standards. Because, for example, I wouldn't want to be the future mayor of Midville if it means that I will be held at some unrealistic level of morality. Because at the end of the day, as much as my position is higher, but then I am only human. I am subject to being manipulated by other people. I am subject to getting tempted to do other things. That is just human, let's not call it human nature, but then let's just say it's human error. So to conclude, I'd like to just say that it is largely dependent on the fact that what do we mean by a high ethical standard, and whether or not these ethical standards want to infringe on these people that we voted into power are things that make sense, are things that are acceptable to and well expected from a normal human being. Thank you.
I'd like to thank that insight from the junior mayor from Midvale City. With that procession, I'd like to proceed with the rest of the debate. May we please have the third speaker from side proposition to give his speech. Our junior mayor, Councillor Kamogelo Malikane from Johannesburg.
Cool beans. Am I audible? Okay, cool. I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. The West or the United States didn't just like Nelson Mandela because he was a black man who could speak and put himself in a position of power and wanting to be a leader. They liked him specifically because they knew, irrespective of whether or not he gets that leadership positions, the morals, the ethics he exemplified as a human being were going to remain irrespective of whether or not he took that position. That's something we on proposition value. A couple of things I'm going to do in this debate, but I'm going to provide a lot of clarity here. Let's just think about ethics. In its form, the reasons that align with why people do action are governed by ethics, right? So that's just action and inaction, but further than this, it does two things. One, it delineates between the neutral actor with a supposed understanding of moral compass and the actor with a moral compass governed by their ethical understanding. That's something exceptionally important. But two, it draws a line between inaction from actively and clearly choosing not to engage from the start of a motive and the bystander inaction. That's something important. But why is this specifically impactful? Threefold. One, if we prove that the greater expectation in ethics should be placed on leaders because it governs correct moral compass, we win. But two, if we prove that the objective and its benefits serve the greater collective, we're still justified, even if this debate isn't about corruption or showing that these leaders will be better leaders and getting better governance in that aspect, right? But even further than this, I want us to specifically think about the process that goes into into how somebody becomes a leader in the first place. I think in order to become a good leader at the first place, you have to be in tune with the people in the first place. That's why in a lot of African democracies or newly formed African democracies, the people who become the first presidents were often revolutionaries, people who were part of the struggle that went into people fighting for their rights and their liberty. So we think these individuals who will be in these positions of power ought to have these higher moral standards placed upon them because they, one, have an understanding of what it's like to be a person who is struggling and doesn't have the mechanisms to free themselves, but two, they've been put in a position that allows them to fight for it while still having that understanding from the ground level. A couple of things I'm going to do in this speech, right? But firstly, I'm going to provide you with two clashes on who's better, firstly, for leadership, but secondly, who has the better understanding of ethics in this debate. Right then, firstly, on leadership. From the very top of their speeches, they give you this idea that people who are elected are there to represent everyone, and that's cool. We're fine with that. But we noted specifically in all of our speeches that wasn't something that those individuals forced themselves into. Those individuals put themselves in a position to be a leader, to be at the forefront of that struggle. That isn't something they were forced into. But secondly, holding them to account is harmful. This is something that you got as a second argument from their first speaker. Notice how a lot of the impacts you got from this arguments were things on necessity and how it's acceptable and how it's something that you need from these leaders in that instance. They haven't showed you exactly how it's harmful when you don't hold these leaders to a higher ethical standard, and that's something we're still able to stand upon because of the principle, 7-layered principle Cameron gave you, and they still haven't responded to it. Thirdly, they give you this idea that they want equal punishment and equality. We're fine with that. All we're saying is that we'd hold everyone to a higher moral standard. So we hold them equally to a higher moral standard. It's not necessarily to say that there'd be a very large discrepancy between the kinds of accountability you get in that instance. But even further than this, notice how their principled argument is hinged simply on leaders being selfless, and that's a good thing. But notice how their principled argument is just a multi-layered pragmatic argument. It doesn't show you how devoid of any actions that come out of it, they're still winning this debate. But show you, we're okay with leaders being selfless. It's a very good thing. We're okay with that, but they haven't showed us why specifically it's bad to place a higher ethical warrant on them to be these leaders in the first place if they have an understanding of what it is to be a person who's in the struggle in the first place. But strategically, let's just think about this on an individualistic level. Leadership and how it exists with morality and ethics is a relationship and a transaction. I'll show you this very simply. Coach Itu is somebody who pays exorbitant amounts of tax to the state, and the state promises him things like food, like water. All he expects of the state is that they provide him those things consistently. That is why you hold them to a higher account, because they have access to the taxes that Coach Itu pays. Those are the things that you need to recognize in this instance. But sixthly, notice how Kevin's speech was exceptionally impactful because it showed you how equality is unlikely to happen in any instance, but even if it doesn't, they're still unable to ensure good governance on their side. Notice how a lot of their arguments are hinged on each other. They don't stand devoid of it. There hasn't been any case progression. But before I move on to any other responses, yes, I'll take you.
How does holding a leader to a higher ethical standard change their actions?
When you hold a leader to a higher ethical standard, they're able to understand that the fact that they're in a position that means they're above other people means that they're able to have mechanisms to hold them accountable, like them being impeached, like them having reduction in terms of the budgets they get for things to be done. These are things that directly harm them, and that's are able to be deterrents for them when they do things that are wrong. These are things that are exceptionally important to note, because the higher up you are, the harder you fall when things go wrong. Further than this, onto my second clash on how we're winning, right? If the effects, notice on how if the effects don't stop these individuals from doing these things, then it's symmetric on both sides. Because if individuals who are in leadership positions don't understand that when you do something exceptionally wrong, or that you are placed at a higher moral standard than everyone else, and that you're simply at the very best case going to be held to the same moral standard as somebody else, you don't have that active need to try and fight as hard as you can to not be a person who embezzles funds, to not be a person who's corrupt. When you understand that individuals who are placed at a higher moral, at a higher ethical placement, or a higher ability to be able to access resources, to be able to access all of these things that prevent them from being able to make blunders so easily as an ordinary person, it means that you ought to hold them to a higher moral ground. But even further than this, notice how the entire argument is mostly hinged on the reason, the argumentation is hinged on the idea of preventing corruption. That's lovely. We want that too. But we think corruption is something that's going to exist in a lot of instances. But the fact that these individuals have mechanisms to, the fact that these individuals are placed at a higher standard, and the fact that you allow them mechanisms to hold them accountable in the instance that they are corrupt, is something that we value on our side. But even further than this, I think it's exceptionally important to note that leaders, being people who lead nations, and being people who are able to drive an understanding of what it is expected of a state, is something exceptionally important. We think it's important that they noted on their side, which is a very big strategic blunder, that we traded off the perceived humanity of these people. So the idea that, oh, they're human and everybody makes mistakes, is something inexcusable at the point that you have access to people, to the funds of people who pay taxes on a continual basis. That's something we noted to you, and something that was consistent in our line, something they refused to respond to.
I'd like to thank the third speaker from Proposition for giving his speech. Allow me to welcome the third speaker from Mogale, from Midval, to give their speech. Third speaker to give their speech from Opposition.
Okay. I'll be starting in 3, 2, 1. As a leader, I was elected into the government by the people. And the reason why I'm in the government is to represent the people. But the moment you guys hold me at a higher ethical standard, am I really the people? Because an ordinary citizen can go away with murder or can commit murder and serve 5 years in prison. But I, as a leader, if I commit a murder and I spend a lifetime in prison, is that really fair, and am I really representing my people? But let me go on into my rebuttals. What do we get from side Proposition? First speaker's Proposition, his intro is Spider-Man. Spider-Man. But do you notice how he uses Spider-Man he compares Spider-Man to Ramaphosa, the way he compares Spider-Man to Donald Trump, a fictional character to the US president or to the South African president. Because Spider-Man already has morals. Spider-Man already knows what is already held at a high ethical standard. Why? Because he's fictional, because he's perfect. And fictional things can be perfect. But one thing is human beings cannot be perfect. So why are you actually, why are you actually comparing a fictional character to a US president? And then he also tells us that that if a leader misuses this, if a leader misuses this power, then these ethical standards or holding them at a high ethical standard will mitigate this. But this simply is not true, and they do not prove to us how this will mitigate this standard. Because the third speaker answers my POI and tells us that actually they will know what they're doing is wrong. But will that actually mitigate their actions? Will that actually mitigate corruption? Knowing that I'm actually supposed to be I'm supposed to have more integrity than an ordinary citizen, and I see 5 million rands in front of me. Will I actually take the money or will I not? This is not being proven to them, to us on their side. They also sound like the leaders are not being punished. They tell us, yes, what they sound like is that our leaders are not being punished when they commit crimes, when they commit corruption, whereas they are already being punished. But why are you actually holding them at a higher ethical standard because they're at a high place? Because one thing we need to understand that your position does not make who you are. Your work life does not mix with your personal life. So once you hold them to a higher ethical standard, what then? Because you cannot hold a president to a higher ethical standard when the president goes out there to represent South Africa. When Ramaphosa is supposed to have more integrity and South Africa is a messy country, how will he actually represent South Africa in itself? This is something we question them as a side. But then they also tell us that people will look at the leaders doing wrong and actually think they could do the same or actually copy, which is simply untrue because they do not characterize these ordinary citizens. They do not characterize how these people actually look like. Because if I see Ramaphosa committing corruption, does that mean I'll actually go to my job and say, since Ramaphosa stole money, I can also embezzle money? This is actually not true because we do not think that these are actually adult human beings with actually common sense, will not actually copy what a president is doing because he has power, whereas I don't. Yes, whereas I don't. So we cannot compare that what he's doing and what I am doing is the same, and therefore holding them to a higher ethical standard will bridge this gap or will fix this problem. But then he also tells us that they will do this by harsh punishment. So why would you want to punish a person of leader? And this statement is immoral in itself. You want to punish a leader even more for a crime because of his status or because of where he is. But the reason why he is there is because of the people. So why are you separating the people? Because if you think about it, us people, as citizens of South Africa, actually do have the power. Why do I say this? Because people were actually able to vote, and that's why we have a government of national unity. People actually voted to actually mix all our political parties together. Does that not mean we actually have power? So if I have power, why is he being held at a higher ethical standard, or why is Ramaphosa being held at a higher ethical standard rather than me? Or why is he? Yes, why is he not basically being the same as me? As the same as me. Yes, let's move on into the second speaker, my rebuttals for the second speaker. Taken.
Is leadership solely about representation?
Okay. Leadership is not surely about representation, but it's one of the contributing factors or one of the main factors out of many is why a leader is there. A leader is supposed to represent. Because imagine if South Africa gave everyone in this room the power, and I want the pass rate to be 100%, and someone wants it to be 50%. How will the distribution of power be then? That's why a leader is there, to actually represent the majority, but to also lead the country into a better place. But how will we do this when a person is being treated differently than an ordinary citizen? Because America is a messy country. But the moment we want Donald Trump to act in a certain way or to treat others in a certain way, is he really representing America? But let's move on into my rebuttals for second speaker. Second speaker says, how do we actually measure what is equal? But if, yes, how does we measure what is equal? So if a leader commits murder and he serves 10 years in prison, and I commit murder and I serve 2 years in prison, is that really fair? We do not see that as equality because we committed the same crime. We killed one person. But why does he spend more years in prison? Because of his place. Because I could be the CEO of a small business. I also have power in my small business. But because he has power in a higher business, you want to treat him differently. This therefore questions their side. Because no matter your position, you still have autonomy over your life. You still have autonomy in how you treat others and how much integrity you have, or if you take account for what you are doing. But then he also tells us that there is an imbalance of power. But considering, like I've said before, considering people voted for the GNU because they wanted the GNU, there is no imbalance of power. Because now we have the GNU because people didn't know who to vote for, or didn't want to vote for ANC because Mkondo Wesizwe was there, but didn't want to vote for Mkondo Wesizwe because EFF was there. So what's the best thing to do is to mix them all up. Does that not mean that we have power, considering that now we chose who our leader was? And then collectively, collectively as the GNU, will represent South Africa as itself, as a diverse country because we have a diverse government. But then he also tells us that he talks about letting a corrupt leader go. But one thing we need to understand is that we're talking about holding people to higher ethical standards, which means they are not going to be they're not going to be punished. So they are not actually going to go off and embezzle money and go out to be free. The motion clearly states ethical standards are not the way of punishment or education versus punishment as the last motion. Because we are telling you that they should be equal because of equal representation and all of that, right? But then he also tells us that they create trust. Yes, they create trust. But knowing Ramaphosa, will actually trust him more knowing that he actually has.
I would like to thank the third speaker from opposition for giving her speech. Allow me to also apologize. I was notified that it was Midval speakers, but it is the Mogale City being represented by our opposition. With that being said, I would like to welcome the opposition reply to give their speech.
I was starting in 3, 2, 1. Within this motion, I have identified two main clashes within this debate. Firstly, holding leaders to a higher ethical standard or not. Secondly, who's then best vulnerable for the actors. So already going to who's then best for the vulnerable actor, which is going to be our first clash within today's debate. What we get from the side of proposition is that leaders should be held to a higher ethical standard because of one, these leaders are already representing people, and through this representation they're being corrupt because of they have higher power, they become wealthier because of they have higher resources to them. They have more resources than ordinary people. Secondly, they tell us that, you know what, because of that, you know what, they need to have harsh punishments as a whole. Then they tell us, they're telling us about their justification of how then leaders, because of their leaders' mistakes, and secondly, how then the moral capital is being involved in this, and how then representation, you're representing a brand, and that brand is having hope on you, and how are you actually representing that? We then respond to this in 3 ways. Firstly, we tell you that, you know what, these people, holding them to a higher ethical standard does not necessarily mean that you're solving the problem. This means that you're causing more problems, hence already you're bringing about inequality, and how then equality is not served within your case. Secondly, we tell you that, you know what, you're harming these people's representation, because one, you're making them bad leaders, because you know what, they cannot actually live up to the standard. Being a bad leader means that you cannot, in societies, this means that you cannot actually represent these people. Then they come back, they tell us, you know what, we gave you a trade-off of how then a human functions, and how then humans make mistakes. We still stand firm within our point of how then a nature of a human being is to make mistakes. They're not perfect, they're not perfect, and how then they're bound to make mistakes. Even if they continue telling us about their trade-off, we show you that the impact of humans having to make mistakes having mistakes, it's very greater, and how then there's room to improve and improve on your decisions as a whole. For there, we win this point of who's then best vulnerable for the actors. One, we then win it under that we know what, we then acknowledge that these leaders are not rather perfect, they themselves. They're actually representing these people, and we then best voucher for equality on our case rather than inequality on their case, and how then these ordinary people are the ones who voted and elected these leaders to then represent them in this case. Already done with that, going into who then best holds leaders to a higher ethical standard, or should we not hold them to a higher ethical standard? They tell us that, you know what, because of being corrupt and they're losing societal trust, we should then hold them to a higher ethical standard. Hence, we want to bring back that trust from the people. Secondly, because of the resources that they actually have to then become better leaders. We respond saying that, you know what, because of corruption, that doesn't mean you will end corruption. This means that, you know what, that doesn't mean that you're actually ending corruption, rather you're making.
I would like to welcome the proposition reply speaker to give his speech.
I'll be starting my speech in 3, 2, 1. Opposition lost this debate for 5 reasons. Let me lead by example. Firstly, what was their strategy? Trick question. We are 7 speeches into this debate, and if you're still confused as to how their case works, note that you're not alone. Their first tells you something about, like, in their world, everyone is held to the same ethical standard. We are still unclear as to what that actually looks like. The problem is, that problem is unique to that side of the room insofar as we spend 2.5 minutes of my speech dedicated to showing you what having a higher ethical standard looks like, i.e. demanding harsher punishment or a harsher form of punishment when leaders are dishonest compared to an ordinary citizen doing the same thing. Comparatively, note that there's a misunderstanding as to what equal ethical standards is for opposition. Is it equally high? Is it equally low? What am I actually debating against? As an additional contextual observation, note how unlikely that equality actually is in the first place. How do you measure ethical equality, especially given the fact that people are in different circumstances? The single mother at home has to meet certain requirements in order to feed their children. So the ethical standard that you want them to uphold is the same as a millionaire embezzling funds. They already have that type of advantage. It's just so much different. But it's easier on our side because the public can see, oh, this person got punished more because they're a leader. Ah, yes, because of the fact that they influence a lot more people, therefore it's justified in order to punish them a lot more than the ordinary single mother that doesn't influence anyone. She literally just does it because it's a survival choice. On their side, on our side, it's not a survival choice. But second strategic observation, they missed this debate. We told you in the beginning, and we framed that how leaders exist from every walk of life, not just politics. Therefore, we weigh them out on engagement because they aren't able to prove to us why they're able to hold the majority of leaders accountable. A parent is someone who's accountable. A parent is someone who's a leader. Sports stars are leaders. Celebrities are leaders. Politicians aren't the only leaders that we're engaging with. We weigh them out. We told you about every type of leader. But let's just clarify this funny example about Spider-Man. Note that we already told you that this is someone who's a role model. But look me in the eye and tell me that Spider-Man is not someone who still had a one-bedroom apartment. He still had to deal with things like working 2 jobs. Spider-Man is an inspiration, and he's not a leader bound to the circumstances that he's in. He's an inspiration because he's still a leader regardless of the circumstances that he's in. That is what we're talking about. They missed the debate, but they still have the nerve to shift their case to something that a learner gave them an idea in the crowd there. What did we say under this? Like we gave you 7 layers under this principle as to why we're justified to hold these leaders accountable to these high ethical standards. I didn't spend my holiday prepping these cases to get blue ticked, but unfortunately I did. What did they tell us under this principle then? Firstly, it's harsh to punish someone that was elected to represent you. Firstly, we're not punishing like everyone. If you stick to the ethical standard, it happens. But secondly, that's literally, we already told you that that is what has to happen. You have a leader of opposition, even though the mayor is the one that's representing you, because people can still change like after you elect them. You need that representation. You need that form of like accountability. But secondly, they tell you about pressure. Firstly, we told you that it's voluntary, but secondly, we told you that like pressure, listen to what they said, but just slower. It's pressuring to be a good person in society. But thirdly, it's symmetric because we don't understand what their case is inherently. We weighed them.
And that closes the debate. May we all please give a round of applause for our finalists. With that conclusion, may our debaters, our finalists from Mogale, City, and Johannesburg please cross hands. Following, please shake each other's hands. Following that, then remain in front for pictures with the Senior Speaker of Johannesburg. May we all please rise for the Senior Speaker of Johannesburg, Councillor Mtembu, as she comes up to give her address.
You may be seated, thank you. Junior Speaker, I took your place there. I know you're the one who's supposed to say that. I'm so used to being in control of this house. Feels weird to sit on the other side. But I would like to acknowledge you, our Deputy Junior Speaker, acknowledge the mayors for Mogale City, Midvaal, and Johannesburg, acknowledge all the teachers, the parents, the members of the debating team, and all the students from the different municipalities. Ladies and gentlemen, good day. It is my honor and pleasure to welcome you all to the esteemed, this chamber is called Koni Bapela Council Chambers. And I hope majority of you know who Koni Bapela is. It makes sense when you go to a certain place to find out who it's named after. It is a space where critical decisions that shape the future of our beautiful city, Johannesburg, are deliberated and made. A couple of weeks ago, the president of the country, Mr. Cyril Ramaphosa, was here, and we're speaking about the future of Johannesburg. Because Johannesburg is a big municipality. If Johannesburg fails, there's a big chance South Africa will fail. I trust that standing in this chamber today will inspire each and every one of you going forward to continue and have constructive debates as you navigate your journey towards becoming the future leaders of our country. And the reason why I'm touching on this is because once upon a time in high school, I also participated in debate. It was one of my favorite subjects because, well, today I can say this, I like to argue. I like to put my ideas across because ideas shape and change a society. Debating is not merely an academic exercise. It is a vital platform that sharpens young minds. It promotes critical thinking, and it nurtures confidence. I think you can all attest that in our country, we need critical leaders. We need leaders who will represent the people, and we call those people servant leaders. We need servant leadership. More importantly, it encourages you to engage with real issues facing our society. And those issues, you touched on them today. You spoke about accountability. You spoke about the moral code. You spoke about integrity. Do we see that today? When we speak about accountability, you know, a lot of people tell us that Africa or South Africa has got one of the best constitutions in the world. But what about accountability? What do we do to people, leaders, who loot the coffers of the state? We all saw what happened with COVID-19. Up to date, no one has been held accountable. As the Speaker of Council, one of our responsibilities is to play our oversight role and hold executive accountable. When you hear stories about all the municipalities and the money that's been stolen, the officials, the politicians, these are things you should be thinking about. When you debate, deliberate, and argue, one day you'll be out of here and be an adult, and you hold a leadership position. You'll come to a crossroad where you have to choose. Are you going to be a leader that is liked by everyone because you don't speak out against corruption? Or are you going to be a leader that represent the people, not liked by everyone. And you are not liked because you speak out and stand against people who are looting the coffers. Which road are you going to take? This should not only be a debate here, but we must leave this place knowing that a seed was planted in our country, in our municipality. There is no accountability. There is no mechanism to enforce it. Hence, I'm saying this to you, that go back, research, and find out what is wrong with this accountability. What is missing? Maybe you can come up with a solution that we need as leaders. But with that being said, I would like to congratulate all of you for partaking. Standing in front is not easy. To share your ideas is not easy. You know, it's not an easy thing to do. But we need such platforms so we can engage. We need such platforms so we can see the young people we have in our society. And I came here and I was very tired. I was complaining to my team. But once I sat in the chair and I listened to your ideas, your debates, I was very impressed. I even said to my political advisor there that, you know, we need such people even in council. One day, they must sit in seats or boardroom that will be making decisions for the country, not only the municipality, not even the country, the world, because that's what I saw today. With that being said, thank you so much for the invite, and I would like to end it there.
I would like to thank the Senior Speaker of Johannesburg, Councillor Mtembu, for her wise words that she shared with us. And I hope that the words that she shared with you all, including myself, will be taken into the future. Allow me to welcome, but before I continue, students, you may come in. Allow me to welcome the Director of the Coach Itu Academy, Coach Itumeleng.
Thank you, Speaker. I'd like to say, Speaker, that what you heard today, I think, is a final sort of result of what the Johannesburg Student Council, together with the Coach Itu Academy, and most importantly, 5 Trails and GIZ, I think have been doing for the past 2 years. There is, I think we've got a colleague here, two of our colleagues from 5 Trails. 5 Trails is Cape Town based, and they've come up to Johannesburg about, I think, between twice and thrice to workshop the larger cohort that you know of the Johannesburg Student Council on ethical leadership and what it means to be good and great leaders and accountable leaders, and you know, and all of that. So I do think that, you know, today is I think marks the beginning of something great for the Student Council, particularly within the Office of the Speaker. Okay, so thank you very much for that. Thank you. I would like to call up Lauren and Brenda to come and assist with handing out certificates. Speaker, you signed these. Are they not beautiful? They're beautiful, hey? Okay, please just stand there. Okay. Yeah. And I think Speaker and Councillor Nobuhle can join us. Sorry, Councillor Shuma can join us. Yeah, there. Yes. I think if you guys can just stand here. Yes. Yeah. Okay, so you'll just give to them. Then one by one. Okay, so we'll first call the Johannesburg Student Councillors. They'll first come in a group, and then they'll take a group picture together with the 2 councillors and Ms. Lauren from 5 Trails. Okay, Councillor Cameron Gadden. Councillor Kevin Kaumuza. Councillor Mpumelelo Msipa, Councillor Nombalenhle Dlamini, Councillor Mpilo Kunene, Councillor Kezia Perry, Councillor Lesego Manchidi, Councillor Matthew Kaiser, MMC Tatohatsi Mbongo, go to the front. Huh? Please make sure that you've got the right one in your hands. Oh, there. Councillor Levonseki. Jude Hutting. And Mayor Kamokhelo Malikani. Let's give them a round of applause. Okay. Can we have some on this side, please? Have they got the result? Have they got the result? The result. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. Move over to Mogale City. Please just speed up as you come forward. We've got Musa Machaze, Luzugo Zita. Please, can we speed up, guys? Buhle Siatlolo. Lungile P. Yamkela Nonjabe. Let's go, let's go, let's go. Muchaini Gundo. Roneo Muraba. Is Yamkela here? There. Mtutuzi Mazibugo. Linda Kazaembe. Hope Manana. Angelique Malora. Angel Malora. Councillor Lesego Lehaha. And Naledi Konyana. Let's give them a round of applause. Where's Councillor Lesego? Where's the junior mayor from Mogale City? Yeah, no, he's out, he's bait there. Oh. Yeah. No, get that certificate there. Here we go. Lesego is coming. Could we have the officials from Mogale City join in the team? Educators and officials. Yeah. No, this is the, please don't take pictures yet. The junior mayor from Mogale City is coming. No worries. Thank you very much. We now go to Midvaal Municipality. Councillor Praising Hopton, Councillor Retabile Mapike, Councillor Apiwe Motsuhaye, Councillor Tsegofatso Diniso, Councillor Mbali Makume, Councillor Tembelihle Mkameli, Councillor Samantha Peters, Councillor Babalotte Letsane, Councillor Kelebogile Sidinyane, Councillor Katleho Mkameli, Councillor Phoebe Nche, Councillor Masabata Bulawa, Councillor Makaris Mese Lenonya, Councillor Buhle Hlophe, and Councillor Kelebogile Mokoena. Let's give them all a round of applause. Thank you very much. Let's give them a round of applause once more. No. Brenda, please can you join us? Yeah, top 10 speakers. We've got a couple of ties. In 9th place, we have Councillor Mbalente Dlamini. In 8th place, we've got Kilebukele Sirinyane. Please come forward, come forward, come forward. Woo! Come. It's the same, yes. In 8th position, we've got Buhle Siatlolo. 7th position, we've got Musa Machase. In 7th, we've got, also in 8th is Buhle Siatlolo. In 7th is Musa Machase. In 6th, we have Kevin Kahumusa. Tying in 4th are Kezia Perry and Matthew Kaiser. Tying in 2nd is Cameron Gadden and Kamokelo Malikane. And the best speaker for the Inter-Municipal Debates is Councillor Lesego Manchidi. Yes. Huh? Oh, interesting. Okay. It's first the announcement, then we announce. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. We've gone 15 minutes over. Are we good? Yeah, let's go. Right. The team walking away with bronze today, which was the highest, the third highest team that couldn't make it to the finals, was the team from the city of Johannesburg, number 2. Let's give them a round of applause. Could all the speakers please come forward? Could all the speakers please come forward? Yes, ma'am. Was hulle net vir them, and then they'll just take a picture together. Who? Okay, thank you very much. And now, for the final debate result. Yes, so we first announce the winner, but then the runners-up come first, yes. Okay, thank you. All right, on a 3-1 split. On a 3-1 split, the winners of the inaugural Inter-Municipal Debate Championships are, let's drum roll. It was the team in government, Team Proposition Johannesburg 1. Congratulations to team in Proposition Johannesburg 1 and commiserations to the team in opposition, Mogale City 1. Could we please rise as Mogale City comes to collect their silver medal and their second runner and the first runner-up trophy. Thank you. Yes. Please put there where could we please have the educators? Remember, he's dressed like a young man today. Mr. D, can we have you in front, please? So we announce the winner, but they come up first. I know it was confusing. Yeah.
Absolutely fine.
And they're all gonna come.
We still celebrate them.
That's for, oh, it goes to Moses. And can we rise as our champions come and collect their trophy? Let's give them a wonderful round of applause. Let's go. Siyabang. Don't go too far. Just come closer to. Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's all have a seat, please. Congratulations to both Johannesburg and Mogale City. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Councillor Gadden, please, can you put that trophy where the Speaker's desk is? Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to call Councillor Shumba to come and give us the vote of thanks and to close officially. But most importantly, before anything, thank you so much to the Office of the Speaker for allowing this to happen. Thank you very much to the Greater Private Office of the Speaker for allowing this to happen. Thank you so much to 5 Trails for ensuring that this actually truly happened. Speaker, this has been, I think, a big dream of both the CIA as well as the Johannesburg Student Council. But I think it's a big challenge now to the private office and its greater sort of space to make this and to make the official Clash of the Metros that we conceptualized a couple of years ago an official thing to happen, I think, just beyond this. And I think with people like Lauren and people like Sabiha and the likes, it could be a great thing, especially if we all hold hands and ensure that we just preach this gospel across the entire country. Thank you very much. But without any further ado, and to close today, please allow me in welcoming Councillor Shumba. Thank you.
Thank you, Coach. Good afternoon, Speaker, junior and senior speakers, all the mayors, protocol observed, everyone else who's here to support you guys. I'd just like to start by asking all of you to rise and just give yourselves a huge round of applause. Yes, it's okay, you can scream it. Let's go. There we go. I am here on behalf of the GOD chairperson, Councillor Zigebe. We spoke, me and him, and he gave me quite a few things to speak on, but the energy that I got from you guys is great. You guys are amazing. Some of you, when you came here, you looked sad because you didn't get the position that you wanted. And that's how life works. But that says next year you must do better. You must come guns blazing. Guns blazing. We are here for that. We are here to support that. Through you, Speaker, maybe I would like to just make one request going forward for the coach and the team. Maybe all the schools that are represented here, we must have like a bus or 10 kids from each school to come and support them. You know, I can see they are all stressed, so they don't have a backup, like people that will support and cheer them on because they were in the team, so they're not really relaxed, they're not enjoying the moment. So maybe a little bit of support from different schools to just come to the final round and to fill this room, maybe that will assist. I would like to also thank Ms. Sabiha Motala from GIS, Ms. Lauren Daniels, and Mr. Nhlanhla Ndlovu from Five Trails, Deputy Director of Midval, Private Office of the Speaker, Ms. Bilia Chabalala, Coordinator of the Student Council, Ms. Kilebohile Morake, Manager of the IGR from Mogale City, Mr. Shimi Pate, and Executive Manager, Ms. Nomkita Fani, Director of the Coach Itu Academy. Yo, Coach Itu is very strict, but okay, we love him. Thanks, Coach Itu. And all the adjudicators, Speaker, thank you for allowing our future to be here and debating on such a strong topic. You guys now know and understand what accountability means. You guys now know where this country needs to go. You guys are seeing what is happening right now. I am very passionate. I was saying to the winning team, there's no female voice. That's why they couldn't get their recording right, because I'm very big on seeing females in the forefront. Not that I want all the males to go behind, but they've led for so long. Maybe that's why we're here, but that's besides the point. Females can do it better. We are the champions to all, everyone who participated. Coach Mara. So I want you guys to also give yourselves a round of applause again. The speaker is behind you. Everybody that's in here, let's just give everybody a round of applause. Siyabangena, Team Joburg. Thank you very much, and we are at the end.
The teams that got gold, silver, and bronze today. Let's give them a round. Thank you. Otherwise, thank you very much and have a safe journey home. Thank you.